California dreaming about you.
As the field now begins to get in formation, Richard Petty, as he has done at every race this year on the Fan Appreciation Tour, is leading this first parade lap, and then he will fall back into his regularly assigned spot, which today is 39th. And we have an in-car camera riding with the King this afternoon on his final event. There it is, looking out the back to the other 40 starters.
Waving to the drivers as they go down the front straightaway. Now Richard will fall back into his starting position, as you said.
There's the in-car camera with the King, Richard Petty. He's fallen back into 39th position now. And in one more lap, he will get this race underway.
You know, he's
okay, guys.
He and Davey Allison. Of course, Richard, I don't think he's showing his emotion the way that Davey is. We could tell that Davey, I talked to him earlier, he really is nervous.
There's a hot air balloon overhead carrying the number 43, and at the conclusion of this event, we urge you to stay tuned for a very special salute, the Portrait of a King, a special program devoted to Richard Petty. It is, believe me, worth staying with us for after this event. Portrait of a King immediately following our live telecast of the Hooters 500. There is King Richard Petty.
About to go a lap down to Earnhardt. Here's the leader, Dale Earnhardt, directly behind Richard. We're looking at the camera atop Richard Petty's STP Pontiac. And we see Earnhardt has pulled out to a 15-20 car length advantage on Ernie Irvin.
He found that high groove about 15 laps ago, Benny, and it's working for him. The way his car is set up right now, Earnhardt, he just took off.
So Dale Earnhardt is leading the Hooters 500 with Richard Petty down a lap now. Irvin, Bodine, Wallace, and Elliott complete the top 5. King Richard Petty in his final NASCAR Winston Cup race is currently in 26th position. 65 starts here in Atlanta, 6 wins, 22 top 5 finishes. And we now recall another magical moment in Richard Petty's history in this Petty memory.
This Richard Petty memory is brought to you by the First Brands Corporation, makers of STP gas treatment. 1979, the championship is on the line between Richard Petty and Darrell Waltrip at Ontario, California. But the King collects his 7th title in what may have been his most challenging crown.
The most gratifying would have been the 7th championship in '79. It came down to the last race at California. At Ontario, California, and I think he was 3 points ahead of us or something like that. Where one position would make a difference. It was a deal that Buddy Baker, I think, would sit on pole, and he was up front, and I was up front qualifying. And Buddy told me, he said, you know, said, we get out in front here right early. He said, I'll pull over and let you go, and you get 5 points, so you'll get back in front of the point deal. So Darrell sort of seen what we was doing then, because then he's 2 points behind. So when they have the caution flag, then Darrell stays out to get his 5 points back. Well, when he does that, then when he does make his pit stop, he gets in the back of the line. Then somebody spins out, and Darrell's got to spin to miss him. He winds up losing a lap, and we wind up winning point standing by 11 points or something like that.
Looking back on Davey Allison from Richard Petty's in-car camera. Davey goes to the inside of Richard and passes him.
Petty's seen this scene many, many times, and we're watching now. Looking through the windshield of the race car. Going down in the corner. 1,185 races.
And both of you guys have had the experience of watching that car either run in front of you, behind you, but probably more than not ahead of you.
Most of the time in front of me, yeah.
He was always right there.
As we watch Petty and Harry Gant, once again now Earnhardt has gotten back by Ernie Irvin, so I guess they're all going on up in front.
The final race for King Richard Petty and the decision on who wins the Winston Cup Championship for 1992 here today at the Hooters 500, live from Atlanta Motor Speedway.
Oh, crash! Down the front straightaway.
Ken Schrader Wally Dallenbach.
Darrell Waltrip's involved.
And Richard Petty is flaming going into turn number 1.
He's knocked the oil cooler off his car, and the oil is on fire.
Richard Petty, the car is on fire. Petty has got the car stopped.
It'll go out. Fire extinguisher. It'll go out. That was Richard yelling to his crew, get a fire extinguisher down here.
Yeah, they got I pulled up to the fire truck.
Richard said, I pulled to the fire truck.
Well, I'll tell you, that's a great presence of mind, right?
And what a way for the career of Richard Petty to end. Let's not say right now, though, that his race is over. They could get the car back going, but I doubt it. There is the King out of the car. And this may be the final farewell.
But thank God he was able to walk away from it and wave to the fans.
But you know, they ought to take the King back to the garage area and something better than a record.
Yeah, you're right about that. It's not a good way to end a career that has been so great. Now here's the crash. That's Trickle.
Ooh,
look at Dallenbach get bumped around.
And there's Richard Petty going in and hitting Darrell Waltrip. Looks like the rest of these cars are able to slow down without too much trouble. And Richard driving down to the fire truck, like he said. There's an oil cooler up there, as I said, right behind the left front fender. That was the hood I saw going up in the air. That
was that your eye level?
Yeah, right when the crash started.
Came off a Schrader's car, did it?
Not sure.
I think so, yes.
Well, it almost blocked the track there for a moment.
I would guess that someone came off the corner on the outside of another car, and the fellow didn't know he was there. Made contact.
John Kernan is with the King.
Well, Richard Petty is sitting down here in the garage area. Richard, they're working on the car. Apparently you're okay, but you're going to try and get the STP Pontiac fixed.
Well, we're looking to see what's going on. It busted the oil cooler in the radiator and caught on fire, and I drove down there to a fire truck and got it put out. But I don't know that when it busted the oil cooler that it didn't run out of oil and mess up the bearings. So first thing I got to do is put it back together and then crank it up, and still got oil pressure. We might go out and run a few laps. The oil pressure's messed up, naturally that's all over with, but no front fenders and nothing on it right now. It's tore up pretty bad.
You know, you'd rather go out in a blaze of glory, but you're almost out in a blaze today.
Yeah, wasn't the kind of blaze of glory I wanted to go out in, but the main thing is nobody got hurt in the wreck, and I've spent 35 years doing this, and I'm still walking around talking, so good Lord looked after me for a long time.
Now, if you don't get it fixed to get back out, will you still be hanging around for the end of the race ceremonies that were scheduled?
Well, we'll sort of play that beer according to what everybody wants to do, and we'll take care of everybody.
All right, Richard Petty, despite the car catching on fire and sitting here in the garage in his last race, manages to flash that famous Petty smile.
And I hope that they can get that car back out and running. I would like to see the car on the racetrack when the checkered flag drops.
We all know that glare can become a serious problem for a driver late in the afternoon. Well, in years past, the solution was quite simple. You merely tint a major portion of the right side of your windshield, thereby minimizing the glare from the setting sun across the turn. See, NASCAR thought this may be a safety hazard because a driver following behind Richard Petty in his STP Pontiac might not be able to see through this heavily tinted area to a car spinning or maybe a blown engine up front. So in 1992, they said no more tint across the bulk of the windshield. You basically have been limited to a factory tinting job. The upper 5 inches here is all you can tint. This increases visibility for cars and drivers following Richard Petty. They can see through the front of his windshield to a possible problem up front, but also they can see inside the cockpit now, as Richard may decide to use a hand signal to wave and say, hey, I've got a problem or I'm slowing down. Both cars in front and behind can see that. So a new 1992 NASCAR rule to improve safety on the racetrack.
And that's a very important piece of information because of the sun that becomes a major problem here in the late afternoon, and we are just about to that point. Then later in the race, another multi-car tangle as Dick Trickle and Ken Schrader came down. Also involved, Darrell Waltrip, Wally Dallenbach Jr., and King Richard Petty. You can see flames from a car in the middle of the straightaway. He took the car down to the inside of the racetrack and in fact parked it near a fire truck. But Richard Petty ended the final race of his 35-year career in that way. Richard was not injured, but it was a spectacular way to end a long and illustrious career. And this is how it looked from Richard Petty's perspective. He hit Rich Bickle in the back end, also made contact with another car, and then the flames became evident from the left front of the race car.
Come on, give her the fire. Bring the fire extinguisher.
Richard Petty directing the fire extinguishers.
Richard Petty coming out of the garage area.
Here comes Richard in the SDP Pontiac. He has the car running again with just 2 more laps to go, but he will be on the racetrack when the checkered flag drops. He was involved in a spectacular accident early in the race. It saw the car break an oil cooler up front, caused some white flag is out, causing some fire, but Richard is back out on the racetrack. And Richard Petty is taking one final lap around this racetrack as the fans salute him, and his career comes to an end.